Well, we're just 1 week away from the long-awaited, the much-anticipated 2025 NFL Draft, and so that means it is time for my final official quarterback rankings. I will tell you who I think the 10 best quarterbacks are in this year's class, a class that has gotten beat up. It's been labeled as bad, then it's come around. Some people think it's better than others. There's been a lack of consensus after the first two guys, but are my first two guys the same as most? I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. Let's do this.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
If you would, please subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and if you want notifications, hit that bell. All the other ways that you can support the channel are listed and linked down below in the description. If you are watching for the first time, maybe you came in because you're just a draft nerd like me and you want to see what my rankings are. I am a Seahawks content creator, but also just a passionate and addicted draft nerd and a quarterback evaluation nerd as well. And so that's why this particular position group every year, I always do my overall rankings and do not tailor it to any one team, but just the guys that I think are the best 10 and have the best chance to have the best careers. Let's talk about the class as a whole first before I get into the specific list. As I said at the top, like this class has been in and out of the ringer ever since last fall. When, you know, as we look ahead, as we always do, to like what comes next. And sometimes we do that to a fault, right? You hear fans sometimes that are a little weary of committing to a quarterback in any particular year because, well, next year's better. Let's wait for that. And teams do that too. Look, teams are projecting out 2 and 3 years at a time and what potential draft classes might start to look like. And they'll use that to some extent in making decisions on their roster for the current year. If, for example, they know that in 2026, they're going to be losing some guys from their edge group. It's a good example here in Seattle, for instance. But 2026 shapes up to be a really good edge class because they can project out who the third-year players are going to be that will be draft eligible that year. The 5-star recruits, you know, the guys that they're already aware of or that have had an impact already as freshmen, then they can kind of look forward to that. However, that's not an exact science, never has been, and it's more muddy now than it's ever been because of the impact of NIL. Players who aren't slam dunk top 15 picks, players who are unsure about their draft status, but also have that sort of resume, have that kind of name recognition and brand, they can make money staying in school. And so it does muddy the waters. It makes it very, very difficult to try to project out in the future. And we're seeing, this is a great example of this. Coming into this year, people thought this was going to be a bad class. And they're already saying wait till next year on some level. But there is no guarantee that next year is going to be better. There's this expectation that Arch Manning's going to come out next year and be the first pick in the draft. There's an expectation that Drew Aller is going to come out next year, the first year he's eligible. Garrett Nussmeier will be out of eligibility, so we know he's coming out. But there's no guarantee that Aller will come out. He might get paid to stay. He might think that he needs more work on his game. He might have a bad year. He could get hurt. And Arch Manning, I've been saying this for a long time, just the person he is, his family history, his love for that university, I do not see him coming out after just 1 year as a full-time starter. I don't. I think we're looking at 2027 for him. So as we look to this year, there was kind of a lack of consensus. And there were some guys that stayed in school too that we weren't expecting to come out. Remember going into the season, when I had Bruce Feldman on the show and we talked about the quarterback class, he talked about guys like Cam Ward and Jackson Dart. And at that time, I thought this is interesting to look back on. He said based on what scouts and coaches around the league were telling him, he thought Cam Ward and Jackson Dart were going to be first-round picks. Nobody else did at the time. And now Cam Ward's going to go 1-1, and Jackson Dart, I believe, is going to go in the first round. And then there were some other guys that transfers, muddies the water. Will Howard, I don't think had the appearance of a day 2 quarterback even at Kansas State, 55% completions. Then he transfers to Ohio State and raises his profile. And now I think he's pretty solidly a day 2 pick. I think the more we look at this class, though, and this really kind of just checks a whole lot of boxes for me when it comes to scouting philosophy, is if you pigeonhole an entire position group as bad in any given year, and you ignore it because of that, or you dismiss it because of that, you're going to miss on some players. Good example this year from another position group. It's not a very good center class. That seems to be the consensus. There are some guys that play guard or even tackle that project to center, but we haven't seen them done it. We haven't seen them do it. Jared Wilson is sort of the consensus number 1 overall center. He's a day 2 pick, most likely. After that, there's a lot of uncertainty. But if you dismiss the class as bad and so you don't draft a center, you're going to look back in 3 or 4 years and you're going to go, oh, damn. Jonah Monheim's a really good center. Seth McLaughlin's a really good center. Oh, somebody converted Clay Webb to center and he's really good. Jacob Bayer turned out to be a really good player. You have to take it case by case. And I think that's no truer anywhere else than it is with this quarterback class. Case by case. And also, it's not what these guys have done, it's what they could be. And so when I get into this, it's projection, right? But I will say this. I understand that the boom bust needle is whipping back and forth much more violently with this entire class than it does with many, if not most. All of these guys I'm about to show you, with maybe one exception, I believe have NFL starter upside. But the margin for error is thin. These guys, and it's usually the case with quarterbacks, right? But they need to land in the right place with the right scheme, the right coaching staff, the right plan, the right development. They have to be surrounded with enough talent. And then they need to be on a realistic timeline and not be thrown into the fire too soon. We've seen the bust rate of top 10 quarterbacks. And it's because why? It's because those are bad teams. They're desperate for a quarterback. They've taken you in the top 10. So there's public perception, there's pressure, there's ownership pressure. You're paying the player. And then there's the limitations in practice. It's harder to develop these quarterbacks if they're not starting. And so you force them in much sooner than you should. And it's such a delicate position. It's such a steep learning curve that you can break a player. You can break someone's wiring. And sometimes it can't be repaired. Now, we've seen more cases in the last couple of years of guys that fit that description that have reprogrammed themselves, or as Mark Sanchez so aptly put it during a game this year in reference to Geno Smith. No, he was referring to Sam Darnold, who replaced Geno Smith in Seattle now, as it turned out, that he got a software download, right? The Jets quarterback who was caught on mic on Monday Night Football saying he was seeing ghosts and he just couldn't see anything that the defense was doing and he looked terrible doing it. It didn't break him. And now he's resurrected his career. But more often than not, when that happens to a young quarterback, we never hear from him again. So some of the guys on this list could turn out to be that. Some of them could turn out to be much better than that. I believe in the scouting adage of tell me what a player can do. Maybe it's more from a coaching perspective than a scouting perspective. Tell me what he can do, and I'll figure out a way to get that out of him more often. And also the adage of if I see you do it once, I know you can do it more than that. I tend to view things a little bit more optimistically. What could be? What if? We'll get into some of that. And then I'm just going to be fairly brief. I think concise is the better word. I've got notes here on all these little capsules, and I'm just going to read right off of them as we go through. So let's show you the list, shall we? Here it is. No surprise at the top for me. It's Cam Ward, not just because I'm a Coug. Obviously, I got to see him up close. I watched every game, every snap that he played at Washington State University, but also studied his Incarnate Word tape pretty closely when it was announced that he was transferring to Wazoo, because I wanted to familiarize myself with the player, and then I watched as many chance I could, and probably watched 6 of his full games in Miami. Jackson Dart, I have as my number 2 overall quarterback, followed by Will Howard, and then Shadur Sanders. I'll talk about why when I get down into the capsule. And then Kyle McCord at 5, Tyler Shuck at 6, followed by Jaylen Milroe, Riley Leonard, Quinn Ewers, Brady Cook, and then I threw an honorable mention on there, Seth Hennigan from Memphis. Let's start with Cam Ward. Best release in the class. That was the thing that jumped out to me when I watched his Incarnate Word film, which was, grainy and dark, and, they're not on TV. I was shocked how quick the release was. Texted some of my good friends that are as into this as I am, and said, fastest release I've ever seen. Now, that got him in trouble at times at Washington State, and still does on occasion, because I think that the release is so quick that sometimes he gets out ahead of his feet, and his feet aren't quite set, and the ball can sail on him a little bit. But that's gotten better. And that's the thing that impresses me the most, or one of the things about Cam Ward. He throws the best ball in the class, I think the most consistently, but it's that he grew. He got better every single year while making jumps in competition. Not little jumps, not going from the Big 12 to the Big 10, massive jumps, going from Incarnate Word to Washington State University and then to Miami. He has the right demeanor. He's a leader. He's going to be the hardest worker on your team. He has that perfect blend, I think, of being really confident, like sure of himself, almost on that edge of being cocky, but there's enough humility in there that he kind of knows what he doesn't know. And he knows, he can recognize his weaknesses. He takes coaching well. He's a guy that you're going to love in the locker room. I think he's a great pick for Tennessee. And I've heard some people say that he's not really the ideal Brian Callahan quarterback, but they're going to make it work anyway, and because of the talent. I'm not so sure, because I see a lot of Joe Burrow in him. Like, takes chances. He's a risk taker, trusts his arm almost to a fault at times, but more often than not is right. I see some Joe Burrow in him, but I think he's a little bit better athlete. He's more athletic than you can think, or he's more athletic than you think. Now, there's some decision-making issues there, and I'm not even talking so much about decision-making in the passing game. Again, that fits into that category of, like, he's grown. He's gotten better at that every single year. He's gotten a lot more willing. I saw at Miami, he was a lot more willing to take the check down or throw the ball away when nothing was there. He doesn't feel the need to have to try to hit a home run on every play, although that is still part of his game. But I think the biggest thing that he needs to improve when it comes to his decision-making is when to use his feet. There are times when the C's part, and he could run for 20 yards, and he still dances around back there, and he's trying to hit the big play. It actually cost Washington State his final game with them. It cost them what would have been a significant win for that program. It was the last time that they played the Washington Huskies before they left for the Big Ten. It was at UW, and they were driving for what would have been the winning touchdown, and it was 4th down, and exactly as I described, like the C's parted. He could have run for 30 yards, got the first down, been in field goal range. I think it was within field goal range. Now I can't remember if they had to score a touchdown or not. I don't think so. I think that's why it was such a pronounced error on his part. Tried to throw the football instead, incompletion, game over. But he'll get better. I'm sure of that, because he works at it. Now, why do I have Jackson Dart at 2? A bunch of reasons. Not the least of which is I got to see him up close in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, as I did some of these prospects. And he just, From the moment he stepped on the field, he just looked the most natural, the most accomplished. He looked like that guy that I always love going to. It's been a long time since I've watched a high school practice, but college practices. I remember the first time that I went to watch a practice at Washington State University because I wanted to see what Drew Bledsoe looked like in person. It was his first practice as a true freshman. And it took me like 2 seconds to pick out who he was. Just not because I knew his number or any of that stuff, not because he was taller. They had some other guys on the roster at the time that were as tall as him. It was just, you just knew. You could tell by the way he moved, by the way he threw the football, by the way he carried himself, his mechanics. Jackson Dart has that kind of air to him. And I'll tell you this right now, when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks, I know it's an intangible. It's hard to put a finger on. I do place quite a bit of weight on moxie, whatever word you want to call it. That air that someone has about him. John Schneider in Seattle calls it, the impact of tilting the room. When he walks into a room, you go, oh, that must be the quarterback. That's QB1, right? Jackson Dart has that air about him. Very, very confident. Can't wait to see his John Gruden QB class, which unfortunately is the very last one. I think it debuts the night before the draft. But here are my notes. Highest QB rating in the country. Don't hold his college offense against him. I hear this all the time. Like, oh, Lane Kiffin schemes open a lot of open receivers. He knows how to scheme. He gets guys open, so he never has to come off of his first or second read. Well, that's not Jackson Dart's fault. He can only do the best job that he can. He's going to take advantage of that. You're not going to come off... You're not going to be more concerned with proving to NFL evaluators that you can get to your third and fourth read, that you're going to pass up a gimme on your first or second read. That's ridiculous. Plus, we have seen this countless times over the last 20 years. We've seen air raid quarterbacks where the scheme is so quarterback friendly that they get big plays handed to them, opportunities to make big plays on just about every snap, and they're running 4 verts all the time, and they have their receiver core is just so much more talented than most of the secondaries that they're facing, that they have those opportunities. Those guys aren't learning NFL reads by running the air raid, but the air raid has kind of infiltrated all the other offenses of the college game, and those guys have succeeded. Kirk Cousins said he didn't really understand how to read NFL defenses until he was in the league for 4 or 5 years. Wrap your head around that. Did Patrick Mahomes, was he accomplished at reading NFL defenses? Hell no. I think Jackson Dart has it in him, and that's what it comes down to. And that's the stuff we don't get to see. We'll get to see it on like the John Gruden camp, right? The whiteboard stuff. How impressed were you? Well, I'll hold on to that because I'll wait until I get to that player. The rest of my notes, though, don't hold the college offense against him. Within that framework, he got better every year. Every year. Here are his completion percentages, his 4 years. First year being at USC, he was only a part-time starter. 61, 62, 65, 69% by his senior year. And he shows the dynamic traits. It's not an elite arm, but it's a significant tick above average. 29-6 touchdown interception ratio his final year at Ole Miss, but he was not taking checkdowns. These were not easy completions. Remember the knocks on Bo Nix? Led the country in completion percentage for the Ducks last year. What was it, like 74%? But it was, well, it's all checkdowns, it's all screens, it's all slants. He's not pushing the ball down the field. Don't know if he can do that. Well, Sean Payton did, and he certainly showed it his rookie year in Denver. He achieved that touchdown to interception ratio and that completion percentage despite being first in the entire country in FBS at yards per attempt, almost 11 yards per attempt. He's pushing the ball down the field, and he still achieved those numbers. And his big-time throw percentage was number 1 among all the quarterbacks in this draft class. I really like the blend he has of downfield aggressiveness and is willing to check it down when nothing's there. The mobility is an underrated weapon as well. 1,500 yards rushing with 12 rushing touchdowns in his 3 years at Ole Miss. He just kind of looks like the modern quarterback. You know, the prototype used to be the 6'4", 240-pound guy. Now it's the 6'2", 225-pound guy who can take a beating, who can run the football, put his shoulder down if he has to, and help you with his legs. And that's Jackson Dart. Now, My third quarterback is that prototype. 6'4", 235 pounds. Much better athlete, though, than you might expect when you first see him and you see that build. Now, the thing about Howard, for me, is he didn't start out as my third best prospect. He was probably in the 5, 6, 7 range. I'd say after the college football playoff, because he played so well in the postseason against the best competition, right? He saved his best for last, and you could see him taking steps. He was probably in that 5, 6 range, but he just kept moving up and up and up. The more I learned about him, the more I watched him, the more I watched his interviews. And I'll admit, while I don't try to place too much weight on him, his Gruden appearance blew me away. Of the episodes we've seen so far, with one minor exception, like, he's borderline brilliant in how he can communicate checks and reads and defenses, and how he can pick up information, disseminate it, and reconstitute it and spit it back to you. Really, really impressive in that manner, which he should be. He started over 50 games at college, very experienced, 4-year full-time starter at Kansas State, and then obviously moves to the biggest stage possible and plays at Ohio State, wins a national championship. Here are my notes on him. Handled the competition jump as well as can imagine. At Kansas State, he was a sub 60% completion percentage guy. Now, it was a different offense and different receivers around him, obviously. They ran some like RPO stuff there. He ran the football quite a bit more at Kansas State. Then he goes to Ohio State and he completes 72% of his passes. I don't care who your receivers are. You're also playing against the best defenses and the best defensive players in the country in that conference and in the college football playoff. You're playing against future pros. You're playing against guys that are going to be taken in the draft next week. He didn't just bump it from 58% to 65%. That would have been impressive enough. 72%. It's pretty ridiculous. But he also did it making NFL throws, playing for an NFL coach in Chip Kelly, into NFL windows. Of all the quarterbacks in this class, he probably has more NFL tight window throws on his resume than anyone. And he's a confident thrower. Doesn't have the best arm in the world. Doesn't have the arm you wish he had at 6'4" and 240. Although if he did, he'd probably be a first rounder. But he knows exactly what he has in the chamber when he needs to reach back for it. And that's why he can throw into those tight windows. And if you say, well, but in the NFL, those are going to get picked or those are going to get batted down. Well, that's where the development comes in. You adjust to that. You adjust to the speed of the game. There are throws that he made at Ohio State that in the NFL, he's going to know, oh, I'm going to have to release that earlier, or I'm just not going to be able to make that throw. Right? He's mobile for a big guy, as he said. He's sturdy. I like his build. He's really smart, as I said, and he's a leader. You saw him during that college football playoff, like rallying guys on the sideline, grabbing guys by the shoulder pads, really getting fired up and intense. He could wind up, if you put him in the right situation, being the best of this group. I really, really believe that. I think Will Howard has a big ceiling. I think the ideal fit for him, I know they have a lot of needs, but the LA Raiders just went out and committed to an older quarterback. And as much as I respect and really like Geno Smith's game, like, I think they also need to pair him with someone out of this class. And obviously with Chip Kelly being the offensive coordinator there, you know, if you can get Will Howard on a day 2 pick and sit him behind Geno for a couple of years, I think you've set yourself up with a perfect quarterback situation there, as perfect as it could be for the Raiders, given what they went into the offseason with. So then at number 4, again, this is where I have Shadur Sanders. I know some people are set on having him at 2. Some people have him at 1. I'm seeing more and more as we get closer to the draft, some people are dropping him down kind of into this range. My notes on Sanders. First of all, he's tough as nails. He has had to overcome his entire playing career expectations, right? Being his dad's son. That's not easy. But also really bad offensive line play at Colorado. It was borderline inoperable his sophomore year. And then they went out and hit the transfer portal hard. It got better, but man, it's hard to watch all 22 tape or even broadcast tape, even his 2024 stuff, where he's just not being consistently harassed, which unfortunately amplifies some of his shortcomings as far as pocket manipulation, pocket presence and management. Corbin Smith, who covers the Seahawks, had him on the show yesterday. We were talking about Shadur, and he said some similar things. He said, he bails out of the pocket instead of stepping up. That can be coached. Best example I can think of that is Russell Wilson when he came into the league was terrible at that. What did we see him do every time he was pressured from the inside is he wouldn't just get out and run, try to make plays. I mean, that was one of the strengths of his game, but it was that he had this really bad habit of trying to bail out backwards to the left instead of to the right. He's a right-handed quarterback. Made it tougher on him. Made some spectacular plays, but just as many times he would bail out and run right into a rusher. He got so much better at stepping up into the pocket when Brian Schottenheimer arrived and just did a much better job about coaching the mechanical parts of the game to him that it really elevated his profile in the middle of his career. I see similar issues with Sanders. He's a tough evaluation too. He just doesn't have a single outstanding trait. Even the accuracy that you hear talked about as his best asset, like he doesn't always throw a pretty ball. Sometimes it wobbles. Sometimes it gets away from him a little bit. It's not a strong arm. Like he has to be on time. He has to be in rhythm. Even the accuracy comes with a price because of that arm strength. It's a concern. Like he's got to be in a timing-based offense, and he has to be in rhythm. He perceives pressure sometimes when it's not there. I mean, that's going to happen when you have the constant pressure and poor O-line play. I think he has the mental makeup to overcome that. I do. For all the concerns about his personality, whatever, there's so many mixed takes on that. I think he's a smart player. And I think he's been coached so hard in his life by his dad that he'll figure out a way. But he's got to be in the right situation. The personality questions are going to persist also. I think he's more like Bo Nix than he is or was or is like any of the top 3 guys from last year's draft. But he can succeed in the right situation. It may benefit him to fall in the draft. I'm glad for him that it sounds like the Cleveland Browns aren't going to take him at 2. I think that could be a potential disaster of a situation for him. To me, the best fit is the Pittsburgh Steelers at 21, or maybe they have to move up a little bit to get him. They've got the makings of a really good offensive line there. Their style of play, they always, really like to run the football and establish a run. It's not a high volume passing offense. I think that could be a good situation for them. They have a good defense. It's going to keep you in football games. They're not going to be asking Shadur to go out there and win for them every week. And if they should get Aaron Rodgers there after all of the drama and the back and forth, and it seems like that's what's going to happen, no pressure to play right away. That could be ideal for him. Go to Pittsburgh, sit behind Rodgers for a year, let that offensive line continue to grow. Like they're going to get Troy Fautanu back this year, coming off injury. That's going to elevate that group. I think that could be a good situation for him. But he's a severe boom or bust prospect, as most of the guys are on this list. But I think as far as the high profile guys go, he certainly fits that mold. I've got Kyle McCord next. He was featured on the Gruden thing today. I haven't watched the whole thing yet, but he's really impressive too when it comes to that. I mean, his dad played quarterback in college, so he grew up in that environment. He told a cool anecdote today where his dad had him taking 5-step drops in the backyard when he was 3 years old. So he's lived and breathed this his entire life. There are those who say, well, Ohio State didn't want him, so he's no good. Well, they specifically wanted someone a little bit more athletic. They just wanted something a little bit different. He played well for Ohio State for the most part. He didn't beat Michigan, right? But I thought at the time, I remember thinking that makes no sense. There must be something off with the guy's character or personality. No, that was not an issue at all. He could have ended up being one of those guys who, quote, transfers down and then we never hear from him again, right? But instead, he goes to Syracuse where he had like a lifelong connection going back to like 6th grade with Fran Brown, the head coach there. And he was told by Brown, we're bringing you here to elevate this program. This is your program. And he put that program on his shoulders and he led them to 10 wins. This kid has lost 5 games in his entire life, high school, college. 5 games he's lost. 3 of them came last year at Syracuse. He outdueled Cam Ward in a head-to-head contest. He had the one really bad game against Pittsburgh, 5 interceptions. But if you watch the Gruden today, like the first 2 were deflected. One was a really bad decision on his part. Another one was a miscommunication with he and the receiver. But after that game, touchdown to interception ratio after that, he went almost 400 passes without a pick, only threw 1 the rest of the way, 15 touchdowns and 1 interception the rest of the way. He got better from that game. He's got a little bit of a gunslinger mentality, but in a good way. He got better. Daniel Jeremiah talked about this a lot at the Combine. He got better at Syracuse by being more aggressive and confident in his ability to push the ball down the field, as evidenced by the fact he led the country. He led the entire FBS in big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays. And what does that mean? It means he's throwing the ball into tight windows. He's willing to throw the ball into tight windows, and he's able to. He trusts his arm. And when you look at the overall touchdown to interception ratio in his career, it doesn't get him into a whole lot of trouble. He knows exactly what he can do. And he also led the country in success rate in just about every category, actually, in passes of 20 yards or more. Kyle McCord's a guy that I think if Sean McVay were to get his hands on him with the Rams, probably not in the first round, but on day 2, sit him behind Stafford for a year or 2, as someone who's a fan of a team in that same division, I'd be a little uneasy about that. I really like Kyle McCord. Tyler Shuck is my number 6 guy. There was so much buzz on this guy, and to the point that not only was he talked about for a minute being a potential first rounder, but at one point, I can't remember who it was now, but one of the big name draft analysts mocked him at 7 to the Jets at one point. I don't see that in him, but here are my notes on Tyler Shuck. He's big, 6'5", more of the prototype that I talked about that doesn't really exist that much anymore. Kind of a throwback, really good frame, throws a gorgeous ball, has the most wow throws on tape in this class outside of Ward, but also has probably as many, if not more, oh shit throws than anybody on this board as well. Some of the concerns, only 1 year of production. You know, he sat behind Justin Herbert at Oregon, and then he went to Texas Tech, and he had some injury issues. Just the 1 year as a full-time starter at Louisville. I'm not concerned about the injury issues because they're freak things. They're not soft tissue. They're not ankles. They're not, elbow or shoulder. It's a broken clavicle 1 year, right? Broken collarbone that the team doctors decided didn't need to be operated on. And then what happened? He came back, broke it again, then had to have the surgery. And then the other one, I think, was a broken leg. Like, these are things that they're not indicative of you being fragile or not taking care of your body or whatever. And then he came back and had the full year at Louisville and played well. And I thought at the Senior Bowl, I thought he was one of the more consistent guys there throughout the week. Didn't look great in the game. Threw a touchdown, but also threw a pick. Just a bad read in the red zone. It was picked off, I think, Caleb Ransaw, if I'm correct. He's an older prospect. Obviously, he's going to turn 26 years old during the season. He's another guy that I think that situation in Pittsburgh would suit him because I think he'd be more ready in some ways to play earlier in his career. At least you'd sure hope so with that age. He's not a fit for everybody, I think, because of that. I think the timeline would have to be that you'd want to see a pathway for him to play early in his career. He's one of those guys at his age, if he gets drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs, like, forget about it. He's not going to have a career, right? All right, then we get into Jaylen Milroe territory. The most polarizing of all of these quarterbacks in this class. He's actually been invited to and has accepted an invitation to be at the draft, one of 17 prospects to be there, which was eyebrow raising because the NFL has become a lot more conservative about who they invite to the draft because they just don't want these guys to fall out of the first round and have to be subject to that scrutiny and that embarrassment of getting to the end of the draft and you're still sitting there and you haven't been taken. And so that likely indicates that at least one team has a first round grade on him or is considering taking him in the first round. And again, with quarterbacks, you have to understand, right? It's different. It's not necessarily whether you think they're worth a first rounder in a vacuum. It's, we need a quarterback. They're really hard to find. Where do we have to take him in the draft to make sure we can get him? And if a team feels like that has to be the first round because someone's going to take a shot on him on day 2 at worst because of the ceiling. He has the highest ceiling in this class, bar none. The elite athleticism. He throws the best deep ball in the class. And that's the hardest thing to wrap my head around because his mechanics are so good throwing a deep ball. But they're so bad from 20 yards and in. Mechanical, stiff. The lower body's not married to his upper half. He really struggles with accuracy in the short game, resetting his feet when he has to come off a read. He has the widest boom or bust margin in this class. If you can improve him as a passer, and I saw advances. I saw improvement between Mobile and the combine. Like it looked like, I think DJ referenced it as he'd gone to the laboratory. He's been working with, quarterback coaches, and there's some improvement there. Thought he looked better at the combine. If you can tap into that and develop that to go along with the athleticism and his ability to hit a home run on any play where he tucks the ball and runs, it's like Lamar Jackson on steroids. But here's the biggest challenge. Cannot play early in his career. I think he's a guy that needs to sit for 2 years, which begs the question, how likely is it that he can even develop and reach his ceiling given the limitations in the NFL on practice these days? How do you develop a guy like Jaylen Milroe that needs so much work mechanically and in processing in the short game in particular when he doesn't get a chance to play? There's only so much virtual reality can do, right? But here's the thing. He's worth betting on because it's A+ character. It's A+ work ethic. He's a 2-time captain at Alabama. When I met him at the Senior Bowl, I was the first one to ask a question in his press conference. I immediately, as soon as he started talking, because I'd never heard him speak before. Had never seen an interview with him before. I immediately thought, oh shit, he's going to be a Seahawk. Because he exhibited those types of characteristics, the way he carries himself. He's going to give it everything he possibly can to try to reach his potential. Next up, Riley Leonard at 8. I'll just go right to my notes on him. Biggest wild card in the draft in some ways. Some have him as high as a 3rd or 4th round pick. Others have him as an undrafted free agent. I think in the right situation, if everything goes properly, he has starter upside. That's what I said most of the guys on this list have, but he could also be he could be in the league for 3 or 4 years, practice squad guy, not be able to hold down a backup job. He was the most consistent in Mobile the entire week as far as ball placement goes from what I saw. And he was off to a great start in the game. Had a couple of really good drives, converted a 3rd and 15 on a dig route that was perfectly thrown, pushed the ball down the field as well as anyone those first 2 drives. And then he got short-circuited by one of his receivers after a catch, fumbled the ball, ended that drive. Otherwise, he might have had a chance to win MVP of that by getting off if he had led him to a score early. He's got a really easy throwing motion. He elevated 2 programs, really brought Duke up and elevated their profile, and then he went to Notre Dame and had them in the college football playoff, right? He's athletic. We saw him run. We saw the first drive against Ohio State, obviously, when he ran it like 9 straight times. And it looks like he has a little more room to grow into his frame, too, which might help with some of the arm strength, too. Not the strongest arm. But it wouldn't surprise me. Again, he's another one that coach's kid, He's got the right attitude. He's got the right mindset. Great locker room guy. He's one of the guys he'll stay. I would see this after practice at the Senior Bowl. He would stay longer than anyone else signing autographs for kids. It wouldn't surprise me if at worst he carved out a long career as a really good, dependable backup in the NFL. Next up is Quinn Ewers. And man, this is a guy that's been on my radar for a long time because I've seen there's so many connections to the Seahawks and John Schneider. He's being trained by Mike McCarthy at the moment. He's very, very close with John Schneider. He's a guy that's been on Schneider's radar for quite some time. He's been on everybody's radar for a long time. He was the top recruit in his recruiting class. He's kind of notoriously known for having the highest grade ever, a perfect grade on the 24/7 recruiting service. Originally went to Ohio State, obviously, and he was stuck there behind C.J. Stroud and Kyle McCord, transferred to Texas, where I think at one point he had committed to Texas, didn't he? And then he flipped and went to Ohio State, so he goes back to Texas. He's one that, at one time was considered a surefire first-round pick, and then he dropped all the way down, and then people thought he was fragile and not dependable enough or durable enough. I'll just read my notes on him. He's a natural thrower. Makes it look so easy. Some think he has a weak arm, but the ball gets there quicker than you think it's going to. It's not a weak arm. Durability issues also, but that's given him an opportunity to show toughness. And last year was the best example of that. Playing hurt. He played through an abdominal injury and an ankle injury that was so severe that he had to have a custom brace on his front foot, which is going to affect your mechanics, as is an oblique muscle, certainly. He's had to deal with the expectations of being the highest rated recruit ever. And he's also had to deal with the pressure of Arch Manning looking over his shoulder and all the expectations and the legend being behind him. Man, and I thought Sark really handled that well. There was the game halfway through the season. Was it the Alabama game? Got off to a really poor start. Sark pulled him. Everybody went, oh, here it is, the beginning of the Arch Manning era. Sark put him back in after a couple drives. He was much, much better in the second half, almost led him back all the way back in that one. Otherwise, I don't think Sark's offense did him a lot of favors. Tons of screen passes. There were times where you're just watching the All-22 and you're just begging to see some downfield shots, and it's just screen. There was one game against Georgia. I can't remember if it was the playoff game or the regular season game, and just screen on the first couple of drives. The upside of that is he's really good at throwing screens. It's not always an easy ball to throw. He's not as athletic as teams would like, especially in the modern NFL, and that's going to push him down boards a little bit. I think there's a chance he goes in the third round. There's a chance that he doesn't get picked until day 4. And then rounding out my ratings, once you get down to this territory, you're talking about sleepers anyway. And a guy that's really kind of raised himself in my eyes recently is Brady Cook out of Missouri. I remember the first time I watched him on TV 2 years ago, I really liked him. And kind of had my eye on him going into last season. Took a little bit of a step back, but he also played hurt much of the year. You saw Emery Hunt of the Football Game Plan Draft Guide and CBS Sports on the show last week. He has Brady as his 4th ranked quarterback prospect. And one of the biggest assets is his toughness. There was a game last year where he got hurt, like severely, like carried off the field, and everybody thought he was done, at least for that game. And then he limps back out later and leads them to victory. He's definitely my sleeper in this class. He's an underrated athlete. He can run the football, put his head down. He's tough. I think he had the best throwing session at the combine, and Emery said he looked like the best quarterback at the Shrine game all week as well. I like his internal clock. He gets the ball out quickly. He's that point guard type of quarterback. He can push the ball downfield. He can throw some deep balls. I mean, he made Luther Burden look really good at times. Luther Burden made him look good at times too, because he is willing to just get rid of the ball. He feels the rush really well. I think he's got good pocket awareness. I think one of the biggest issues, we talked about it with Shadur Sanders, is guys trying to do too much and holding onto the ball too long. He doesn't do that. If anything, you wonder if sometimes he leaves plays on the table because he's not looking to push the ball downfield. But he gets rid of the ball really quickly, and he's willing to go to his check down. I think he's a better, slightly taller, little bit more athletic version of Sam Howell, perhaps. And Sam Howell was a guy that I thought had an opportunity to be a starter. I think he was damaged by Eric Bieniemy in that 1 year starting with the Commanders, and then he just didn't seem like the same player when he got to Seattle. And now the Seahawks have gone out, traded for Sam Darnold, signed Drew Lock. It looks like Sam Howell is now probably available for a late pick in this draft or next year's draft, but that's kind of my comp for him. And then I threw an honorable mention out there. God, Seth Hennigan is such an interesting case. Again, saw him at the Senior Bowl. Didn't really stand out to me during practices, and it's because he's another one of those guys that just doesn't have a standout trait. But he was MVP of the game. He was the best quarterback by a mile on Saturday. Ends up, Jack Besh ends up winning the MVP on the winning touchdown from Seth Hennigan, but he had a couple of the nicer throws of the day, had the best stat line of the day. And then that caused me to go watch more of his tape and go back and look at his career at Memphis. And that's where you really start to wonder, this guy might be able to make it in the NFL, at least as a guy that can be a high-level backup, come in and win a couple games for you if your starter goes out. Lots to like in terms of consistency, production, and growth. He started from day one, another coach's kid. Started from day one at Memphis as a true freshman and held it down for 4 years. 6 wins his freshman year, 7 wins his sophomore year, 10 wins his junior year, 11 wins his senior year. He went 3 for 3 in bowl games. He's all about ball. And you look at his production, his 4 years at Memphis, durable player too, didn't miss any time. And it's almost like they copied and pasted his freshman stats each year. Like the completion percentage is it's within a couple of points every year. The yards, like 3,500-ish every year. The touchdown to interception ratio, it's remarkable. You'd be hard-pressed to find another college quarterback in history that has 4 years of consistent production like that. Plus, he stayed at one school, turned down NIL money to go elsewhere. One of my concerns with him, other than lack of real arm strength, very quiet and unassuming demeanor. Doesn't fit that tilt the room standard that John Schneider requires in Seattle. Not sure how that will play in an NFL locker room. But let me just show you the list one more time. Ward, Dart, Howard, Sanders, McCord, Shuck, Milroe, Leonard, Ewers, Cook. Honorable mention to Seth Hennigan. Tell me what you think. What did I get wrong? Who did I miss? You know, fans are really sophisticated these days and smart, and they watch all 22 tape, and they dive into this stuff, and they do mock drafts, and they read all the big boards, and there's so much information out there that you have at your fingertips now that there's probably quarterbacks out there that some of you like. Let me know. Don't just tell me in the comments you forgot this guy or you had this guy ranked wrong, but tell me why. And don't just say, because he sucks. That's not analysis. That's not realistic. Tell me why. What aspects of his game that you like or don't like. Give me your feedback. Really, really appreciate it. Love the engagement. I try to respond to as many of those as I can. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Hit that bell for notification of future episodes. If you want to support the show and what I do, I'm a full-time content creator. This is my livelihood. All the links that will allow you to do that are listed down below in the description. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Seahawks Forever. Until then, 1 week left till the draft. If you want to watch a live draft party, I'll be going live on this channel the entire first day of the draft. And I won't be focusing just on the Seahawks. So again, if you're someone that isn't a Seahawk fan watching this channel for the first time, join me then. I'll have some special guests, and we'll break down every pick all along the way as we go through. Really, really enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. Peace.